when we put the effort forth to really advertise it, people are like, oh my God, I would love to go to this. Like, this is what I want. This is the content I need. Like, we need to fulfill that gap that's happening right now.
Hello, women's hockey fans, and welcome to another episode of the Founding Four podcast. I'm your host, Erica Ayala. The Founding Four podcast is an independent women's hockey podcast, and this episode is going to continue our series entitled The Original Eight. The Original Eight series is my conversations with the 8 NWHL players that have been with the league since the first season back in 2015-16. This episode, we will speak with the captain of the Connecticut Whale. She is one of the 8 who has remained with her same NWHL team all 5 seasons, the one, the only, Shannon Doyle. I spoke to Shannon Doyle at the last regular season home game of the Connecticut Whale. They had that doubleheader with the Sound Tigers. We spoke after that game about being in the league for 5 years, some of the other players that she's competed against in particular, and what it takes to not only stick with the league, stick with anything for 5 years, but how Shannon approaches being on a Connecticut Whale team that in the past several seasons has struggled. She opens up about that, as well as with all of the rest of the guests that we have for the Original 8 series. We also ask them what they think the next 5 years of the National Women's Hockey League could look like. Really appreciated Shannon taking some time out to talk with me. As always, we had a good time. Here's my interview with Connecticut Whale captain Shannon Doyle. Here with Shannon Doyle at Webster Bank Arena. Last home game of the season. How you feeling, Doyle?
I mean, it's nice to play at home. It's always great. We haven't had that in a really long time, so it was really nice to see a few more familiar faces in the stands, so that was great.
Yeah, for sure. I think, one thing that has really been pumped up this year is that you and a number of other players been in the league all 5 seasons, and you with the same team. So that's what I want to talk to you today about.
Okay.
Just being able to be someone that founded this league and is still here. What are your thoughts when you hear that?
It's kind of surreal. It hit me a little bit more this year because we had so many new young players come right from college to our team, so I was kind of feeling my veteran role a little bit more this year, but it's been really, really fun. I mean, every year there's always growth. There's always areas to improve as well every season, but I mean, if we got complacent, then it wouldn't keep growing the way it is. So it's been great working with Danny. It's been great working with Haley, and Bray this year has done a fabulous job, worked so hard for us. And I've just loved it. I've been super fortunate that I'm in Connecticut for teaching and coaching, and there's a team here, and so I have the ability to try out every year and hopefully get re-signed. And it's been, the stars have aligned, and I have been for 5 years. So, I can't say anything other than good things. I'm just super excited that I'm still here and now in a leadership role with the team.
Oh, for sure. As I'm sure are many fans. But you've played with a few players that have come through Connecticut that are also part of the 5-timers. But I'm actually going to ask you about everyone else. So you don't get to talk about those folks. So keep it interesting. But so excluding Jordan Brickner, Elena Orlando, you have...
Yeah.
You played with Fracken, so you can't talk about her either.
Okay, she's not one.
What do you look forward to at those battles?
It's like you always know you're going to have like a really good level of competition against those players, and we all just truly love the sport. So when we're on the ice, I see them coming down. I know they're going to give me their best, and I'm going to do the same for them. And then when the game's over, you're like, great game, man. You love those players now because you've known them for so long. Even if you haven't played with them, you just have a mutual respect and appreciation for their game because Corinne and Packer and Kira do a really nice job just being leaders and just great ambassadors for the league as well. So, it's just mutual love-hate relationship because they're not on your team, so you can't love them all the way, but, you do appreciate the things they do.
Fair enough. And, that seems to be what... I've talked to Kira more in depth about this. Packer mentioned it after the All-Star game, but just, being in a professional setting, especially unfortunately in some ways in a women's professional setting for 5 consistent years, there's a lot that goes into that. You alluded to it a little bit just with your situation being here in Connecticut, living in Connecticut, working in Connecticut. That's worked out for you. But things happen, life happens, and to be able to stick it out is something really tough that I don't think you all as the OGs get enough credit for. I mean, if you could break that down a little bit, what are some of the tougher aspects of being not just with the league, but with the same team for 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's always tempting when the season ends, and I mean, especially with our team, with our record, I mean, anybody would easily point at, well, why don't you try and go to a more winning program and enjoy some success? I mean, but I just love the people that keep coming through the Connecticut Whale roster, and it's just always people that truly love the game and are just great to be around, and they work hard and they care about you. And I mean, for me at this point in my career, I mean, winning is great, and obviously I love that, and I mean, I miss it more times than not this season. But I mean, it's about just enjoying being able to play and grow the game. And if I'm with a group of girls that I know I love coming to practice to see and I love battling with on the ice, then it's worth it. The long drives are worth it. The overtime, getting up early, staying up late, the long hours on the travel, it's all worth it because you truly love each other. So, I mean, love the Whale, so that's it for life.
There it is. She's tapping the logo. I love it. It's a podcast. I can't see her.
Oh no.
And another thing that's great about being with something for 5 years is as you were kind of alluding to, the memories that you make. You've had lots of teammates come in and out. So when you think of just being with the Connecticut Whale, what are some of those memories that pop up in your mind?
I think just the biggest ones that I just love are, I mean, besides the roadies where everyone gets to bond and just spend time with each other, I think you just love when those players score their first goal. Since I've been around for so long, I've gotten to see so many players come for their first time in the league and see a lot of those first time goals. And it's just such a cool experience when you see their face, I've done it, and you're like, yes, you have, and you get to give them a big hug, and it's just awesome, and you love it so much.
Yeah, for sure. And Connecticut, I think, is the only team that's played a neutral site game for a regular season game every year.
Nice.
Well, maybe except for season 1. But, I mean, also, in that way, Connecticut has really been able to help spread the word of the NWHL, whether it's Pittsburgh or even today. What have you seen in that respect as far as how the notoriety, if and how it's changed over the 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, it's always eye-opening when you go to a new place, even here, which is Bridgeport in Connecticut, and just because we're not in this arena before this moment, a lot of people are like, I had no idea that you guys were a team here, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we're so close. So when we go to places like Pittsburgh and people do a nice job of really pushing media and getting the word out before the event happens, I mean, every year we've gone to Pittsburgh, it's been a sold-out event, and it's been just an incredible atmosphere for our team and the team we play against. So it's just, I mean, it's humbling because you get so excited when you see new fans loving the game, but it's also really kind of inspiring because you're like, yeah, we can do this. When we put the effort forth to really advertise it, people are like, oh my God, I would love to go to this. This is what I want. This is the content I need. We need to fulfill that gap that's happening right now.
Yeah, for sure. Another thing that I asked Kira, I asked her this series of questions. She was the first one. But I asked her, thinking about the next 5 years, obviously a lot has happened in women's hockey. We can't ignore that over the past off season. But taking that into consideration, taking your first 5 seasons in the league, what do you hope for the next 5 years of this league and of women's ice hockey?
I mean, I really just hope we're all, both, I will say sides, whatever you want to call it.
Air quotes used.
Yeah, sorry, air quotes. The Dream Gap and then us in the NWHL. I mean, I hate it when people put us on a dichotomy, we're on 2 different ends of the spectrum. We're really not. We both want the best women's ice hockey and the future of little girls have these opportunities that we didn't have growing up. So we're all aiming for the same thing. So ideally, probably without me in 5 years, at the end of that, I doubt I will be still playing, but hopefully I'll still be coaching and I'll still be growing the game in other aspects. But I would love to see a unification of one league. That's what we all wanted before this season, was we wanted one league where everyone knew that this is where the best female ice hockey players were located. and we have a large market where we're tapping into all of these areas, and fans could cheer for us, the East, West. We want what the NHL really has set up, but it takes time. It didn't happen overnight for the NHL. They had jobs and played ice hockey for a while, and then it builds and it builds. So in 5 years, I mean, it seems like a faraway kind of concept to think about, but time really does fly. I can't believe it's been 5 years already with this league. And I mean, year 10, I'm just expecting it to just keep digging its roots in and really forming those strong connections with fans in the current regions and also beyond those.
So look out for maybe Coach Doyle. We're going for GM Doyle, Commissioner Doyle. What are you going for?
I don't know. That's stressful. I coach high school right now, and that's stressful enough. I don't know.
All right, to be continued. We'll see how you feel after this one.
Probably, yes. Thank you.
As always, want to thank you for listening in to the Founding Four podcast. I am so appreciative of the support that I get, whether it's through the Patreon, through our Patreon page, whether it's on Twitter. I've been able to do some giveaways. We've had great participation there. Looking forward to do more. But one great way to support this show is by subscribing. That way you get every new episode right away, but also rating the podcast and especially reviewing the podcast. That's the next generation for the Founding Four podcast. We want to make sure that people know women's hockey has a market, that there are people that know about women's hockey, that care about women's hockey, and that can interview women's hockey players. And we hope that the Founding Four podcast is a home for that. So help us by just popping in there, giving a little review. We'll have another episode this week. It will be the preview of the Isabel Cup final. The Minnesota Whitecaps versus the Boston Pride. For all of the beans, I have Mallory Soliotis from the Boston Pride, a defender for the Boston Pride, who will join that episode. Had a great conversation with her as they were able to put away the Connecticut Whale in the semifinal to reach the final. So, lots of exciting women's hockey updates for you. I think it's also important, while I have a little bit of time, I mean, it's my podcast. I can do what I want. I do want to talk a little bit about Women's Worlds. The information came out, I guess it was Saturday, that the Hockey Canada Federation, in partnership with IIHF, had come to the conclusion to cancel altogether Women's Worlds. The coronavirus, unfortunately, has really impacted a lot of what's happening in the sports world in particular. Obviously, that's the lens of this podcast, but, and lots of events are adjusting, some playing without spectators, or being canceled altogether. And unfortunately, Women's Worlds is one of those things. I want to take a little bit of time to talk about this on the next Founding Four podcast episode, because this has really big implications for what's happening for the national teams, not just in North America though. I think it's easy to, especially because Canada was hosting, to focus on the United States, to focus on Canada, to focus on the players that essentially are in the PWHPA. But you have to remember, every women's hockey tournament that has been canceled and that has impacted PWHPA players in North America has also impacted other federations. And this is a time when women's hockey is starting to get very competitive. You had that amazing tournament. The last Worlds that we saw was in Finland. And they played the United States really close, and it was a controversial game. Canada not in the gold medal game, and we haven't seen any international competition on the women's stage since then. Not to mention that, again, because of the PWHPA, some of these elite players are not playing as many hockey games as they're used to. I said I'd get into it on the next Founding Four pod, so consider this a little bit of a tease, but I did want to acknowledge that even on this bonus episode. So we'll have Mallory Soliotis. We'll have an overview of the Isabel Cup semifinals, preview of the final, and then I'll get into my thoughts about Worlds. Until next time, thank you as always for tuning in to the Founding Four podcast.